If you were sitting in front of a television set on the evening of January 18th, 1974, there is a good chance you remember exactly what it felt like when that slow-motion run first hit the screen. The beeping sound, the electronic pulse, Lee Majors as Colonel Steve Austin, moving faster and hitting harder than any man alive. For 5 seasons, The $6 Million Man was one of the biggest shows on American television, but the story of how it rose and how it eventually came apart is one worth telling properly. This is The $6 Million Man, 1974, how the 70s sci-fi TV smash hit fell apart.
Don't panic, we got plenty of time. We're still coming. Watch it, ladies.
Segment 6, From Novel to Network, How It All Began. The $6 Million Man did not begin as a television show. It began as a novel. In 1972, writer Martin Caidin published a book called Cyborg. The premise was straightforward and compelling. A test pilot named Steve Austin is critically injured in a crash, and the government rebuilds him using experimental bionic technology. 2 legs, 1 arm, and 1 eye, all replaced with mechanical parts that give him extraordinary capabilities. Caidin was a prolific aviation writer and a genuine enthusiast for aerospace technology, and the science underpinning the story, while fictional, was grounded in real research that was happening in prosthetics and human augmentation during the early 1970s. That grounding gave the book a credibility that pure science fiction often lacked.
Look, I don't have time to give you a political education.
I don't want your education or your country.
Universal Television optioned the rights to Cyborg and developed it first as a series of television movies. The first aired on ABC on March 7, 1973, simply titled The $6 Million Man, and starred Lee Majors as Colonel Steve Austin. Majors was already known to television audiences from his role as Heath Barkley in The Big Valley, which had run from 1965 to 1969, and he brought an easy physicality and quiet charm to the role that worked immediately. 2 more television movies followed in the same year: Wine, Women, and War in October 1973, and The Solid Gold Kidnapping in November 1973. And by the time ABC made the decision to commission a full weekly series, the character and the format had already been tested extensively in front of a live audience.
All right, I'll give you my name. And my rank and my serial number.
The weekly series premiered on January 18, 1974. It aired on Friday nights on ABC, in a time slot that had not historically been kind to science fiction programming. But The $6 Million Man did not behave like a show that was worried about its time slot. It drew viewers from the first episode, and within its first full season, it had established itself as something genuinely different from what was airing around it. The show was produced by Harve Bennett, who would later become famous for his work reviving the Star Trek film franchise in the early 1980s. Bennett brought a producer's instinct for what audiences responded to. He understood that the technology and the action were the hooks,
Since you're both so anxious to learn what we're doing here, I'll let you see for yourselves.
but that the human story underneath was what kept people coming back week after week. Steve Austin was not simply a weapon the government had built. He was a man who had nearly died, who carried the weight of that experience, and who operated in a world where his extraordinary capabilities set him permanently apart from everyone around him. That tension between what he could do and who he was ran through the best episodes of the series and gave the show a depth that its premise alone could not have provided. By the end of its first full season, The $6 Million Man was a genuine hit. Ratings were strong, the show had found its audience, which turned out to be considerably broader than anyone had initially anticipated. Children responded to the action, adults responded to Majors, and to the quieter, dramatic moments the show built around him.
I'll show you how to stop the pain. What? Just crouch down like I'm doing.
and the slow-motion sequences, accompanied by that distinctive electronic sound design, became one of the most imitated and recognized visual signatures in 1970s television. Segment 5. The formula that worked. Action, heart, and that sound. Part of what made The $6 Million Man work so consistently across its early seasons was the clarity of its formula and the discipline with which that formula was executed. Each episode generally followed a recognizable shape. Austin would receive an assignment from Oscar Goldman, his handler at the Office of Scientific Intelligence, played by Richard Anderson, whose dry, quietly authoritative presence became one of the show's most reliable pleasures.
Demon says you are not like other humans.
I'm not so sure I'm comfortable with your telepathy.
The assignment would take Austin somewhere interesting. A foreign country, a military installation, a remote location, where his bionic capabilities would be required to resolve a situation that conventional operatives could not handle. There would be action, there would be moments of genuine tension, and there would usually be something human at the center of it, a character Austin connected with, a relationship that complicated the mission, a moral question that the show took seriously enough to sit with. Richard Anderson's Oscar Goldman deserves more credit than he sometimes receives in retrospectives about the show. The character served a structural function. He was the mechanism through which missions were assigned and context was provided. But Anderson brought enough specificity and quiet wit to the role that Goldman became a genuine presence rather than a plot device.
The roads are lined with electronic eyes. I'll know where we are.
We'll just have to stay ahead of him.
The relationship between Austin and Goldman, the mix of professional respect and genuine friendship, was one of the things that gave the show its emotional consistency. The bionic sound effect, that rising electronic pulse that accompanied Steve Austin's enhanced movements, was created by sound editor Robert Cornett and composer Dusty Springfield collaborator Richard Anderson. It became instantly and completely associated with the show, to the degree that it is never fully detached from the cultural memory of the series. Decades later, that sound still communicates a very specific time and place. Friday nights in the mid-1970s, when American television was doing something it had not quite done before.
It looks like they're dilating like they're supposed to. Chances are your blindness is only temporary.
Colonel, you're no physician.
The slow-motion sequences were equally distinctive. Slowing down the film to show Austin running or leaping gave the action a strange, almost dreamlike quality that separated it visually from everything else on television at the time. It was also practical. The technique allowed the show to suggest capabilities that would have been expensive or impossible to convey any other way. But it worked aesthetically as well as practically, and the combination of slow motion and electronic sound became the show's most durable visual and audio identity. Season 2, which aired across 1974 and 1975, deepened the formula in several important ways. The show began introducing recurring antagonists and more serialized storytelling, not fully serialized in the way that television would eventually become.
Tom said you'd be driving the rest of the way.
That's right. Come on.
But serialized enough that regular viewers were rewarded for their loyalty. The Fembots, the Sasquatch character played by Andre the Giant and later Ted Cassidy, and the crossover with the spin-off series, the Bionic Woman all expanded the show's world in ways that kept it feeling fresh well into its run. The Bionic Woman connection deserves a moment of its own. Jaime Summers, played by Lindsay Wagner, was introduced in a 2-part episode in the second season as Steve Austin's former girlfriend, who suffered a critical injury and received her own bionic enhancements. The character was so popular with audiences that when she was written out, killed off at the end of her introductory episode, the response from viewers was significant enough that ABC reversed course.
That's exactly what happened before. These guards were hunting me down like I was an animal.
Jaime Summers was brought back, the death was retconned, and by 1976, The Bionic Woman had its own weekly series. That kind of audience response, the kind that forces a network to literally undo a character's death, spoke to how invested viewers had become in this world. Segment 4. Lee Majors, the man at the center. No discussion of the $6 million man can avoid spending time on Lee Majors, because the show's success was inseparable from what he brought to it. Majors was born Harvey Lee Yeary on April 23, 1939, in Wyandotte, Michigan. He was raised in Middlesboro, Kentucky, after losing both parents at a young age. His father died before he was born, and his mother died when he was an infant. He was raised by relatives, played college football at Eastern Kentucky University.
This must be about Mrs. Collins.
That's right. Look, I don't know anybody in your country.
And found his way into acting through the kind of combination of luck, ambition, and physical presence that characterized a certain generation of Hollywood leading men. He was not a flashy actor. He did not transform himself from role to role or disappear into his characters in the way that the following generation of dramatic television actors would be celebrated for. What he had was something harder to teach. A natural ease in front of the camera, a quality of genuine likability, and a physical confidence that translated effortlessly to action sequences. When Lee Majors ran in slow motion, you believed something remarkable was happening. That sounds like a small thing.
Alex wants to get away from you, Dr. Jackson. He'll have lots of other chances. He may as well face up to what he wants to do right now.
In the context of what the show was trying to do, it was everything. His personal life during the show's run was also a significant part of his public profile. He married actress Farrah Fawcett in 1973, the year before the series premiered. Fawcett would become one of the most famous people in America in 1976, following the release of the iconic poster and the premiere of Charlie's Angels. The marriage put Majors and Fawcett at the center of a very specific kind of 1970s celebrity culture. Both of them enormously successful in television, both of them recognizable from a distance, both of them the subjects of the kind of constant tabloid attention that celebrity couples attracted during that decade. The marriage ended in 1979 during the show's final season, and the divorce was extensively covered in the press. Throughout the show's run, Majors was largely consistent in his commitment to the role.
Did you say taking, Doctor? Dr. Craig?
He did the physical work that the show required. He handled the dramatic material with more care than the premise strictly demanded, and he remained, from the first episode to the last, genuinely convincing as Steve Austin. The character required him to project both capability and vulnerability, to be believable as the most physically powerful operative the government had, while also carrying the quiet emotional weight of a man who had been broken and rebuilt. Majors held both things at once across 5 seasons, which is a more demanding performance than the show's genre classification sometimes suggests. Segment 3, the peak and the beginning of the slide. By its 3rd season, which aired across 1975 and 1976, The $6 Million Man was at the height of its popularity. Ratings were at their strongest. Merchandise, action figures, lunchboxes, board games, model kits was selling in enormous quantities. The character of Steve Austin had become a genuine cultural icon, recognizable to people who had never watched a single episode of the show. The slow-motion run, the sound effect, the phrase, "We can rebuild him," all of it had passed into the broader culture in the way that only a very small number of television properties ever manage. It was at precisely this moment that the first signs of strain began to appear. The merchandising explosion of 1975 and 1976 gave some indication of just how far the show had penetrated the culture.
Hey, Mask's trying to hit the briefcase.
Look out, it'll blow apart.
The Kenner $6 Million Man action figure, released in 1975, came with a bionic eye viewers could actually look through, and a roll of fake skin on the arm that could be peeled back to reveal the mechanical components underneath. It was an extraordinary piece of toy design for its era, and it sold in numbers that few toys of the decade could match. The figure spawned an entire line of accessories, vehicles, and companion figures, including, eventually, a bionic woman figure to go alongside it. At the height of the show's popularity, Steve Austin was not just a television character. He was a presence in toy stores, on lunchboxes, in school playgrounds, and in the imaginative lives of an entire generation of children who had never once sat still through a full episode.
The tremor did occur exactly as the sensors predicted.
And the major earthquake along the California coast?
It's a certainty.
The challenge facing any long-running television series is the same one that faced the $6 Million Man during its 4th and 5th seasons. How to keep a formula fresh when the formula is the thing the audience came for. The show's writers and producers worked to introduce new elements, new villains, new bionic characters, new settings. But the fundamental shape of each episode remained largely unchanged. Austin received a mission. He used his abilities. The mission resolved. The challenge was sustaining genuine tension and surprise within a format that the audience knew as well as the writers did. There were also creative decisions during the 4th and 5th seasons that divided the audience.
I was told no one was here.
The Veladens are away.
The show leaned increasingly into science fiction elements that went further than the relatively grounded bionic premise of the early seasons. Storylines involving alien spacecraft, supernatural elements, and increasingly fantastical scenarios pushed the series away from the aerospace and espionage territory where it had been most effective. Not all of these experiments failed. Some of the more unusual episodes have their own cult following among fans of the series. But collectively, they contributed to a sense that the show was reaching for something it could not quite find. Behind the scenes, the pressure of producing a weekly 1-hour drama across 5 seasons was accumulating in the way that it always does. Writers cycled through. The production team changed. Harve Bennett, whose instincts had done so much to shape the show's early identity, moved on to other projects.
Put in. Second, we'll hit the ministers if they don't come up with the ransom.
The institutional knowledge that keeps a long-running series coherent. The shared understanding of what the show is, what it sounds like, what it cares about, gradually dispersed as the people who carried it moved on. The crossover relationship with the bionic woman also created complications that were not immediately obvious when the spin-off first launched. The two shows shared characters, shared continuity, and occupied adjacent time slots in the ABC schedule. This was commercially smart. The two shows cross-promoted each other and kept audiences engaged across both. But it also meant that decisions made on one show had consequences for the other, and coordinating those decisions across 2 separate production teams was not always smooth. Segment 2, the final seasons, and the decision to end. By the time the $6 Million Man entered its 5th and final season in the fall of 1977, the ratings had declined from their peak, though they remained respectable by the standards of network television at the time. ABC was evaluating its Friday night lineup. The competition had intensified, and the network's patience with a show that had clearly passed its commercial peak was limited. The 5th season ran from September 1977 through March 1978 and consisted of 22 episodes. The production maintained its technical standards. The show still looked and sounded like the $6 Million Man, but the creative energy that had made the early seasons feel genuinely exciting was noticeably diminished.
It's a future gesture against Torque's strength.
If there's any hope, it rests with you.
The stories were competent, the performances were reliable, But the sense of discovery that had characterized the show at its best was largely absent. There was no single dramatic cancellation moment, no public falling out between the star and the network, no catastrophic ratings collapse that forced an abrupt end. The show simply ran its course. ABC chose not to renew it for a 6th season, and the series concluded with its final episode airing on March 6, 1978. The last episode, titled The Moving Mountain, did not function as a series finale in any meaningful sense. It was a standard mission episode, unremarkable in its storytelling, with no acknowledgement that it would be the last. That quiet ending was, in retrospect, one of the stranger aspects of the show's conclusion.
All right, that's it. That's your 16 meters. Now let me talk to Oscar.
A series that had been, at its peak, one of the most watched programs on American television simply stopped airing without ceremony. There was no wrap-up of Steve Austin's story. There was no resolution of the ongoing threads that the show had been building. His relationship with Oscar Goldman, the larger question of what his future looked like, the unresolved emotional dimensions of being the man he was. It ended the way many long-running shows ended in the 1970s, not with a conclusion, but with a cessation. Lee Majors moved on to other projects. He starred in The Fall Guy, which ran from 1981 to 1986 on ABC and was a moderate success, though it never reached the cultural heights of The $6 Million Man.
And you have the right to remain silent. So shut the hell up.
Richard Anderson also continued working steadily in television. Lindsay Wagner's The Bionic Woman had already ended by the time the parent show concluded. It ran for 3 seasons and was canceled after its 3rd season in 1978. The world that The $6 Million Man had built, that particular intersection of espionage, science fiction, and 1970s television drama, simply closed up and went quiet. Segment 1, What Killed It and What It Left Behind, identifying what ended. The $6 Million Man requires looking at several things simultaneously because no single cause tells the full story. The ratings decline was real but gradual. The show never collapsed suddenly. It eroded slowly across its 4th and 5th seasons as the novelty wore off and the formula became predictable. This is the most common way that long-running television shows end, and it is also the least dramatic. Not a sudden break, but a slow fade, the kind that happens when a show has given its audience everything it had and both sides have begun to sense it. The creative restlessness of the later seasons, the drift toward more fantastical storylines, the decreasing emphasis on the human drama that had made the early episodes work, contributed to the erosion. The show was at its best when it treated Steve Austin's situation with a certain seriousness, when the bionic technology was a marvel and a burden simultaneously, rather than simply a mechanism for action sequences. As the series progressed, that balance shifted, and the burden fell away while the marvel remained. What was left was impressive as spectacle, but less emotionally engaging.
For your immunity, I was helping her.
Now Torg has both her and the serum?
There was also the broader television landscape to consider. By 1977 and 1978, American network television was changing. Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, and Three's Company were dominating the ratings with comedy. Dallas was about to launch a new era of primetime drama. The action-adventure hour that the $6 Million Man had helped define was facing genuine competition from new formats and new audience expectations. A show that had felt innovative in 1974 felt considerably less so 4 years later. The merchandising phenomenon that surrounded the show at its peak also created its own complications. The sheer volume of $6 Million Man products, the Kenner action figure, released in 1975, was one of the best-selling toys of its decade.
Calling Steve Austin on Morse. Your radio signal's weak.
The new $6 million man
Meant that the character of Steve Austin existed in the culture at a level of saturation that eventually worked against the show itself. When a character becomes a lunchbox and a board game and a Halloween costume, something changes in how audiences relate to him. The mystery that makes a television protagonist compelling is difficult to maintain when the character is simultaneously a mass-produced plastic toy. What the show left behind, however, was considerably more durable than its cancellation suggested at the time. The $6 Million Man established the template for the bionic hero that has never fully gone away. Every subsequent television or film property involving human augmentation, enhanced physical capability, and the moral questions that accompany both carries some DNA from what the show built between 1974 and 1978. The questions the show was asking about the relationship between technology and identity, about what we owe to the people we rebuild, about whether enhancement is a gift or a cost, were not questions that the culture was finished with in 1978, and they are not questions it is finished with today. The show also produced one of the most durable pieces of audio in 1970s popular culture. That bionic sound, the rising electronic pulse that accompanied every enhanced movement, has been sampled, referenced, parodied, and reimagined in countless contexts across the decades since the show ended.
He's got a ranch in Utah, just outside Salt Lake City.
Sounds good. Have a wonderful time.
It appears in films, in commercials, in comedy sketches, in music. It is one of those rare sounds that operates as pure cultural shorthand, immediately communicating a set of references and a very specific era to anyone who heard it during those years. Few television shows of any era have left behind an audio signature that persistent. In 1987 and 1989, reunion television movies brought Steve Austin and Oscar Goldman back. Lee Majors and Richard Anderson returning to their roles for the return of the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman and its follow-up. The films were warmly received by fans who had grown up with the original series, and they suggested that the affection for the show and its characters had not diminished significantly in the decades since cancellation. A third reunion film, Bionic Ever After, aired in 1994 and brought closure to the relationship between Steve Austin and Jamie Summers that the original shows had never fully resolved. The children who watched The $6 Million Man in 1974 and 1975, running around their backyards in slow motion, making the sound with their mouths, are in their 60s now. The show they grew up with lasted 5 seasons, produced 100 episodes, spawned a spin-off, generated a merchandise empire, and ended quietly on a Friday night in March 1978 without quite knowing it was saying goodbye. That is the full story of The $6 Million Man, 1974. How the 70s sci-fi TV smash hit fell apart. The $6 Million Man was a product of its moment in ways that are easy to underestimate looking back. It arrived at a specific intersection of American culture: the post-Apollo fascination with technology, the Cold War espionage genre, and the particular appetite of 1970s television for heroes who were both extraordinary and quietly human, and it occupied that intersection better than any other show of its era. The fact that it ended the way it did, gradually without ceremony, with stories left untold, is part of what makes it worth revisiting. It deserved a better ending than it got. But what it built across those 5 seasons was real, and the people who watched it have never quite let go of it. If this brought back memories of Friday nights in the 1970s, leave a comment below. We would love to hear what the show meant to you. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe so you never miss another deep dive into the television, the stories, and the pop culture moments that shaped the world we grew up in.